So we have Snigdha with us. We have Snigdha with us. She is Maths Honors, LSR, batch of 2008, and TIS 2010. She brings with her a rich experience in human resource across leading organizations. Of course, she will introduce herself as well, but just to take you through her many accolades. Like she's worked with Tata Motors, Procter and Gamble, Cipla, Oyo, and now Tata Consumer Products. She started her career in industrial relations, a space where women are still underrepresented. She has consistently challenged stereotypes and proven that every role is gender agnostic. Her journey reflects the power of choice, courage, and perspective in shaping an inclusive professional path. Welcome, Snigdha, and I'm sure this session is going to be very enriching, and it's going to be a pleasure hearing you talk about your journey and your experiences. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And it's always wonderful to connect back with the institution and the people who have walked in the same roads as you have. So thank you for the opportunity. And when I was kind of reflecting upon this journey and thinking about what is it that I would like to share with the group here, it always keeps on dawning upon me that LSR has been that institution which has made that shift in my thought process, where I felt that I could be anything or I could do anything. It was not there before I walked in there. Before that, it was more about the routine thing, saying, hey, you'll be a doctor or an engineer, what do you really want to do in life? If you're none of these, please get out. I really walked in with the idea of saying, I want to go to a premium institute, a place which will have me, and a place that will really kind of help me discover myself as an individual, as a personality. And that's where I think the entire shift happened. And anything that happens to my career today, and of course that has happened to life in general, is the upbringing of that institution, which I have to certainly always kind of be indebted to. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll walk through my journey specifically in light of industrial relations, which is in linkage to working in factory in HR. While a lot of people do human resources, and that's one very well known domain in the corporate world, that has a subsection of employee relations and industrial relations, which is basically managing the manufacturing side of it for industrial relations. However, it's not just restricted to that. It's effectively anything that happens with an employee, between an employer and an employee, and an employee and an employee, and that is effectively also in a generic sense called employee relations. I have done my journey in that in a very interesting fashion. Didn't happen by design, just kept on happening through some good choices made and then good people you find in the journey. And then today, when put together, it has summed up to a place where I really feel that yes, it was not something that women really got in, but I'm glad I did, because I have been able to show a lot of others in the function, in other companies, etc., to get a sense that roles are nothing to do with what gender performs them, and roles are nothing to do with where you come from. It's more about how you adapt, how do you deliver. And that's majorly what I would like to kind of talk to the group about this today. So I'll start with a quick general view. I hope you can see the screen on full screen. If that's fine, I'll not want it to be a small one. Yeah. Okay. So, yes, so this is majorly moving from numbers to negotiations, and it's more about somebody who was a maths honors and how did I move into IR. That's a brief set of institutions that have shaped me. So I would always want to kind of reflect and thank them, starting of course with LSR, which I spoke about. Did maths honors 2008. I really thought I was good in maths before coming to LSR. And then, of course, I realized that I didn't know much about the subject. But then I also realized that I didn't know about multiple things, which includes I didn't know how to sing, I didn't know how to dance. And then, of course, I didn't know how to debate, I didn't know how to present myself, I didn't know how to talk about multiple authors in the same breath, I didn't know how to do sports. I pretty much figured out I didn't know much in life. And that's the kind of challenge that you want to be thrown at you, where you realize that you don't know much and you want to be more. So I will talk about what happened at LSR briefly in the next couple of slides, but then by all means, that's where I got introduced to TIS as well. At least at our time, the common joke used to be that people from LSR will either go to TIS or to go to LEC. I think most of us would kind of land up there. So it was one of the institutions you had in great esteem. You had alumni who moved there, and you just wanted to kind of join in. I was again lucky enough to kind of get admitted there. I did my summers with Tata Motors, then got a pre-placement with them, joined them in Bombay. Then I went to join Procter & Gamble. That's where my journey on managing industrial relations started. That's when my journey in terms of getting into a factory started. So I'll talk about that later. I came to Cipla after around 4 years at P&G, and that's where I managed employee relations at scale. So from doing what I was doing for a 250 employees factory, I started doing it for 10,000 employees in sales across the country. And that's where a very different set of learnings came to my way, which then followed by going to OYO, where I really thought that employee relations was not so much a thing. I'll do business partnering. But then I ended up being in a hospitality sector company during COVID, and which was not pretty at all. A lot of things that we had to do, change, pretty much save a sinking boat. And in that process, again, employee relations and my learnings there helped me a lot, which I'll talk about. And eventually, right now at Tata Consumer Products, it's a different ballgame altogether. I manage plantations, I manage factories, I manage employee relations across sales team, I manage employee relations across international borders. So now suddenly the canvas has again become far more bigger for me. It's always daunting every day because this is one area you don't know what happens and when it happens to you in how. But that's the interesting part of the job, that you kind of get to be everywhere. Just calling out the number of cities that I've lived in so far. The reason I'm just calling out it's a live and a work mixture is just to state that, that was on personal front, that my father kept moving as a banker. And then, of course, at work also, I chose to consciously move. That's really shaped me as an individual, because I mean, not that it's really across every state, so I can't claim that, but it's across most of the geographies. And that's where a lot of cultural elements of what happens where comes it to you, and you start respecting diversity, which is also one of the roles that I manage currently. Diversity of thought or perspective that you start respecting. So one of the questions that I usually get asked before anything else is why HR from maths, especially when I was getting interviewed for multiple institutions. The question was, why HR? Why would you do that when you're a math student? I think so. That's where my journey starts, for the fact that I was at LSR good for nothing. I figured that NSS was one place that maybe my kindness of heart can at least get me to do something. So I started with that bit. I started with the child development program outside. I said, okay, this is something I can do. I may not be great at DepSoc or kind of Western music, but maybe I can teach a couple of kids and do well there. I started with that, and then I realized that NSS was such a beautifully run program. The entire institution was so ingrained in the college. There were different projects. For every project, you had a project head. You had hours that you had to clock in, and there was so much governance around it. I started respecting the fact that social changes don't happen by five people talking about them on a debate show. It really happens by people working on the grassroots, spending out time out of their difficult day, so to say, and still making it happen. So NSS for me, for first year, clearly became the reason why I started admiring the fact that if you do program management around people processes, you can really make results happen. And that has to be done in a very methodic way. So by second year, I was managing Indian Cancer Society as a project head, and I was loving spreading awareness around breast cancer, such a relevant topic, so little known, especially when we have so many women around us who understand things very well but don't really talk about this in their families. So took that up as a project for the entire year, and I think, of course, today in hindsight, it sounds like a small impact, but at that time, it felt like you changed the world, of course. And, you learned how you do these programs over and over again, such that they get ingrained in the psyche of the system. So one of the things that I also learned in that process was we had a lot of batchmates who were visually challenged, and they did not have scribes, and that method of getting scribes was all over the place. Similarly, they did not have books. Today, of course, thanks to technology, things are not that bad when it comes to recording of books, but back then, there was a huge challenge in terms of how do you find the right audio aid to support somebody who can't see. So we started institutionalizing it by creating a library in the library of audiobooks, of people donating their recordings, of asking volunteers to record at their leisure, and ensure that books were available for the concerned folks. So that for me started getting into the realm of doing problem solving using logic and recognizing what are the patterns that happen around you. That is my start of wanting to choose a career in HR. Because while maths was teaching me structure, this is a problem, these are the 5 steps, and hence you reach the solution. HR started teaching me the science of adaptability. How do you look at that problem in different contexts? How do you define that same problem to be 10 problems, and you still find a way in which you will find solutions to each one of them? And there are some problems that you don't solve. You should also be very cognizant about making a choice on which one you don't have to. So that entire journey for me started getting interesting, and then I felt that if I had to do an MBA, and if I had to go the typical route of doing a master's and getting the corporate world, HR seems to be one function that I will really really enjoy. As I went along in this journey, I realized that there is a dearth of talent in HR which has a mix of left and right brain approach that is somewhere not balanced out there. You will hear, and I'm sure you would not have witnessed it as much, but when you go to campuses, and which I do more often, to interview candidates, and you ask them why HR, the answer you get is because I'm great with people. I mean, we don't want people who are great with people. We need managers who are great with people. We need human beings who are great with people, not just HR managers who are great with people. You have to have that sense of defining processes for managers and this company that they can run independent of you individually. The HR manager is not there in the most traditional and the most, I would say, Instagram joke worthy point of view of being Rangoli HR. You're not there to make rangolis, please. You're not there to please people and tell them, hey, it's Independence Day, let's just wear white and orange and come there. No, you are there to ensure that the organization which is in service of a particular purpose, which is in service of all its stakeholders, including the shareholders, the employees, the stakeholders, the leadership, the society that you're a part of. You are in service of all of them. And as a leader there who is managing people processes, you have to strike that fine balance of what is the right process that works for this company, what is the right approach that works for this company, so that it is successful on the business side, but at the same time it's not impacting or violating any human rights, so to say. It's not violating any fundamental requirements of the law of the land, and it is ensuring that there is enough and more engagement in their employees to actually continue with them, or wanting to be them. Why should anyone work with you, right? You need to give them a reason strong enough. So for me, I think that mix of both things worked well, and that's where the movement of HR happened. When I started my journey with Tata Motors, I went to their factory in Pune in during my summers, and I was talking. I was working with the team which has come in from Shingur. They were the ones who were ousted after what happened at Tata Motors Shingur there, and they were waiting for their Sanand plant, which is in Gujarat, to get ready. So they were hosted in Midway in Pune, which was in a single building, in a dilapidated old building of Tata Motors, which they had kind of just refurbished for this team to stay in for a couple of months before they moved to the Sanand unit. And that is where I heard all the stories on, and first-hand accounts of all these individuals on what they faced at Shingur. It was quite painful. I still don't know what's the right answer to what happened back then, but I know that at that point the managers in the people function, who I would say were industrial relation managers or whatever they were, um, they were the ones who were in the forefront of managing both the sides. It was difficult. It was certainly draining on their energies, on their emotions, but they had to make things happen. And that to me sounded like a job that I really want to do. That's where my view of entering employee relations and industrial relations started. Of course, it was a man's world. I was told nobody really does IR. Women don't get in there. You will not be able to kind of find a way to also kind of get in, because typically you have people who are far more in experience. So maybe you can try a couple of years later, or and so on and so forth. You get all those stories. For me, luckily, I joined Procter and Gamble after that, and true to their typical GI spirit, they wanted to send a woman to every factory. So I was the first woman sent to a factory there. And of course, it was an experiment. I'm very glad they did that. When I reached there, that's when all my ideal, thought process of what the HR function should be versus what I should be in started coming down very nicely. First day, people didn't know how to kind of get me to office because, which cab do they put me in, because they are not sure which manager is comfortable having a woman in the cab. Then of course I walk in the office, and then suddenly there is a lot of concern on which washroom will I use, because there is no washroom dedicated for women there. Then of course there is a lot of confusion on what uniform should I be wearing. Should I be given a salwar kurta or a sari, or should I be given a shirt pant like everyone else? And in the middle of all this confusion, people are just wondering, why she come in? Okay, it's anyways a 6 months assignment, she'll move on from here, why bother? Thankfully the manager I had there was a very different individual. He just asked me to kind of step in, asked me about my background, about my, of course, he had seen the CV, but then he asked me a couple of questions. Why are you here? What do you want to do? I told him about the Shingur story, my fascination, wanting to see IRER from front. He said, okay, next day onwards, tomorrow morning onwards, your task and your job is to go around the factory for 2 hours in the morning. You will review the security, you will review the pest control, you will review the number of lizards that came in, you will review the number of flies that came in the fly catchers, you will review the canteen. Your job is to ensure that at 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. the lunch is ready, no delay at all acceptable. You will review if all the meetings across the floors of managers are happening on time. That's about it. 2 hours. I don't want to see you. You just kind of do your roaming around the factory. I really didn't know what to do about it. I was wondering, is this the very impactful job that I'm trying to do? But 3 months doing those rounds, and of course, I built relationships. I built relationships across the board with all the workmen there. Somebody's daughter was my age, somebody's relative looks like me. They started finding ways and means to connect with me. Folks would come and help me on, figuring out why a particular area had a lot of cockroach infestation. And then of course that is important because it's product quality that you're talking about ultimately, so you don't take it very lightly. So I started building those equations in the first year, till the point that my boss got very confident and said that, okay, now I want you to become my IR manager, my industrial relations manager. I will ask my current industrial relations manager to get transferred to a bigger job in another part of the country. It was very good for him because that guy was struggling. Every time a young HR manager would come, spend 2 3 years and move on, that individual who had grown from the grassroots was never getting an opportunity to grow because nobody was backfilling him. And it's the first time somebody comes and tells him that he has that opportunity. However, he's a 55-year-old man. He looks at my boss and says, you really think she'll be able to do it? How will she bond with these guys? How will she find a way to connect with them? That was the same question I had. I asked my boss as well. I'm not going to be drinking with them all night. I am not going to be spending time with them, kind of, uh, uh, I mean, going through, let's say, night shifts or spending time in certain way. I'm not comfortable doing it. So how do I do it? And that's when my boss looked at me and said, that's your problem. It's in your head that you think that this job is only done in a particular way. If you are ready to unlearn what you have in your mind, I'm ready to teach you. And I think that's where the shift happened for me. I started finding ways on how is it that I connect with the folks. I will not spend late nighters with them, but of course I can be with their families when they have their weddings on. I don't have to, spend time with them in terms of their ill health, but I can obviously be in the hospital when they are hospitalized and they need support. So I started finding my own ways of bringing in career counseling to their children, for bringing in, conversations on health, conversations on the next big thing that is happening in the news, etc., with the cohort. And slowly, steadily, they started accepting me. I mean, it's about seeing somebody every day, almost, to show up consistently, and you will find value. For me, luckily or unluckily, a posh case happened, and this happened in 2012, which is when the posh the posh law was not notified. It was not, it only happened in 2013. So under the Vishaka guidelines, I was expected to take action on an individual. That individual was my reportee, was a very influential person in the area, and certainly any actions that we would take would come back in a very serious way. We reviewed it, but again, I had a great manager, have to always give him credit for that. But he helped me connect with a bunch of lawyers. We set up the chart sheet, we get that chart sheet going, we got the investigation going, the formal domestic inquiry happened there. And in that process, of course, I experienced something which is a very nice subtle threats. I was assigned a person security officer. I My Facebook was from the company side deactivated, told me don't have your photos up, you never know what's going to go wrong. Interestingly, at the same time in Maruti Manesar, that incident happened where an HR manager was burnt alive, and that was 20 kilometers away from my factory. So again, it was a huge boost to, let's say, the folks there, saying that things can really go wrong. You guys should not be pushing the bill so much. But then we knew what was the right thing to do for the company, what was the right thing to do for the organization, and thankfully that just continued to kind of go in the right way. And I think 3.5 years of being there, I managed these cases. We managed the integration of two companies there seamlessly. We were able to, after 7 days of strike, bring everyone on the table, have no further conversations which went wrong, and build very strong equity with the government, which was through our CSR efforts, which was, again, a very different style of approaching government relationships. It was not through bribery, it was through just making them look good in front of the community by doing CSR work with them. And that kind of, paid off. So for me, this is one area which I really felt that worked well on multiple fronts, because I was able to get into a man's world, something that, at least every Elsa is very clear about, kind of breaking the stereotypes. A lot of complexity, because it's not a straightforward problem. People tell you what they tell you, but that's not actually the problem. But then there is so much action there, because manufacturing is where everything is really happening. That's the place where you are getting products out, and any delay. So for example, at 2 in the night, I would get a call. They would tell me, hey, sorry, we don't have milk today, and because of that the tea is not ready, and because the tea is not ready, the C shift workers have stopped work. Okay, if I did not solve it at 2 in the night, at 7 in the morning, my operations head would be dying at some part of the world, because he can't afford a stoppage in work. So you find your ways. You ensure there's milk powder, you ensure that the canteen is duly the canteen vendor is duly taken care of, and then next time onwards, of course, it doesn't happen again. So multiple such learnings that happened for me, which is where I realized that it was not so much about being a girl. It was about finding value creation, and getting in the middle of action. That's where my rules of influence started building up. So I understood that it's about creating trust, it's about building your equity, and again, it's got nothing to do with what gender you come from. If you've created trust with the employees on both, actually with the employees, with the management, on all sides, you have built your equity, you will find your way. When I moved to the next role at Cipla with 10,000 employees, it didn't really matter that I was a woman, because I was the person behind the scenes. I was sitting in Bombay and advising people across the board. So my gender was immaterial completely. What was important was if I was able to think fast, if I was able to respond fast, was I able to do things that would be acting fairly? Will people have a look at that in the right lens? And then last, of course, it was about being accessible. You cannot be sitting in a corporate office and assuming that people on the ground will adhere to your 9 to 5 rules, or will adhere to your weekends. We are not available, sorry. The action on the ground happens all the time. You have to be available the entire duration as well. So for me, these two things worked very well. And then, of course, as I moved on to do this with my subsequent organizations, I realized that the more granular level things that were important to run this function very well is to have empathy. You are solving for a business problem, but then you're also ensuring that the employees or the workmen, or whatever cadre, blue cadre, white cadre, whatever cadre you're talking about, does not find it to be incorrect or unfair. That empathy works beautifully there. Design thinking in terms of how much can you think of in a forward term, how much can you prepare for what's going to happen going forward. And then, of course, try and be as transparent as you can about that process, because at a lot of times all people appreciate is transparency. They are all adults, they want to be spoken to about in that way. There are times I've just gone back to the union and told them, sorry, this is not the way we should have done it, we just happened to make a mistake, that's fine. That's about it. That transparency at times just helps you, versus creating a story, or kind of coming back with saying that nothing could have ever gone wrong for us. So that for me worked well, and I think I'm just using this one image to talk about what effectively has worked for me over these years. It's a win-win situation if you act as the bridge. You have to be the bridge between what is it that the business needs, which in very crude terms is known as what the management wants, but it's what the business needs to survive. It's a collective piece, but what is it that that business needs to survive? And at the same time, on the other side is what those individuals who are connected to the business need. When I was with Oyo in the 2020 year, unfortunately, we had hospitality hit us. We didn't have much of a choice. We didn't have revenues coming on board. There is no way that you can survive in a company with employees getting paid on a regular basis if there is no income coming in. We had to think well, but at the same time, all the employees were dear to the company. They had done their bit. They were doing their bit. It's just that the external scenario was completely unprecedented for us to find a way in which we found jobs for people outside, for us to find a way in which, even if we were not in a position to pay salaries, we were paying people who had kids who had school fees to be paid. We were paying people for their vaccination. We were getting insurances done for people where they did not have much scope, even if they were moving on from our side. There were a lot of these small little things that you keep on doing in your role, just to ensure that you're finding that one moment of comfort for that one employee. And then of course in my case, most of the times the people that you influence or you do things for, you don't even know about. They don't know you, you don't know them, but you're doing it through the process of the organization. And you're lucky enough to get that opportunity. Today again, I'm blessed to come back to an organization called Tata Consumer Products, which is in the realm of Tata World. We again talk about being completely friendly to what the employee needs are, but at the same time you have to be cognizant that the company also has to has its needs to grow, and only if the company grows that you grow. So for you to be a bridge between both these sides, it becomes the most essential thing when it comes to employee relations. Yeah, Preeti, you have your hand up. Is there a question?
Yeah. So my question, I mean, it's fascinating. Really, I'm so intrigued by listening to all of this, and as you can probably see, I'm even taking notes. But maybe that's just the lawyer in me. You know, having worked with Tata Motors, okay, and then having moved to Tata Motors, obviously an Indian conglomerate,
Yeah.
and then moving on to processes of someone like a PNG, right?
Yeah.
So, what were the differences and what were the similarities that you saw from a global company's perspective versus an Indian company's perspective? Were there anything like, just curious to hear if you have anything to say on that?
No, it was a huge difference. Okay. And in fact, when I was moving on from PNG, that was one of the most selling points given to me, that, it's a global MNC. Why would you really want to move on from that? PNG certainly had the best of the processes. Anything that you can imagine, they have put a process to it. Even if there are acronyms in the company, you will go on their intranet and you have an acronyms dictionary, which can pretty much give the full forms of terms to you. So as an organization, where I landed, and that was lucky for me, I landed in the middle of an integration of Gillette to PNG. So it was seeing a company which did not have the great processes, and then seeing a company which had the processes, and you were putting them together. Tata Motors, on the other hand, Indian conglomerate. On the industrial relations itself, if I were to call out the biggest difference, is that in India manufacturing sector, especially companies that have been around for a long time, unions are a prevalent factor. When it comes to an organization like PNG, which is fairly newer in the as compared to these companies, they have not worked with unions. The approach to managing employee relations is about managing that relationship directly with the set of employees. So they have their ways of bringing in works council, bringing in welfare committees. You have multiple such groups in which you allow people the opportunity to voice their opinion. When it comes to Tata Motors, even Tata Consumers, you have unions which are well represented, they are designed, and then of course, the law takes its course in the way it is put together. To my mind, I think both are unique and good processes. What ultimately comes down to the table is what is it that you do in those conversations. Uh, in a union-led company, you always know who to talk to, but then there is always that sense of, is this person giving you the right reflection of what all the people are thinking, or are they vested interests? Because of course there are vested interests in terms of external influences involved. When it comes to managing something like a PNG where it is non-unionized, Your approach is more about hearing all voices across the table. So you have more of engagement surveys, which give you dipsticks, and then you have welfare committees, which kind of play things back to you. Um, in both scenarios, what is common is the companies have been clear that, if we don't do right by our employee base, we will not be in a position to do right in business. And that, at least to my mind, has been a constant narrative that you need the management, or let's say the leadership, to have. Because if you don't have that right, then of course you're going in a very different tangent, and that has happened in a lot of companies. However, when it comes to the typical processes of abiding by the law, ensuring that you're doing right by the employees, etc., these companies are very, very similar. They have the same ethos of we are here in the longer run. We will not cut corners. We will always be very clear about what is it that we want to do right by the organization. However, both places will have a lot of push on productivity, because that's the way you will grow. You will have to look at ways and means in which you'll get more efficient. The way it is driven differs in these companies. So that's how I will kind of pretty like to answer to both the scenarios.
And yeah, I mean, I've seen this fairly closely in my work, which is of course very different. But we do a lot of HR advice, and I could also relate so much with that story that you were talking about. Like you went in and people had no idea what to do in terms of what uniform you're going to wear. I tell you, I don't want to digress, but what I way back in, I think it was circa 1997. And I had, or 98, I had literally just come back after spending like a decade plus overseas. And I went in for a meeting in South India in like, in a huge group that was running multiple factories. And I went in for a meeting. We were representing a company that was setting up a joint venture. So the joint venture with the Indian counterpart, which is a huge South Indian entity. Essentially, I was the person I was meeting. I sat with him for about 3 hours or maybe 2.5 hours, and then I got up and I said, "Excuse me, I'd like to use the toilet." And like there was like a big flurry, and everybody started speaking in Tamil. They had no clue what to do. And eventually, I was escorted through the length and breadth of the floor, and I was then eventually taken into the chairman's uh, area. Okay. And as I walked through the floor, I noticed I was the only woman over there. So I can kind of relate with this so much. But I think the key point that, what you, from a distinction standpoint or from a parity standpoint, is at the end of the day, both of the organizations, the focus is on the employee welfare and on what you can do for the employees. The systems may be different, and yeah, it's very true. Most of the large Indian companies do have the the moment you start doing something, you have to deal with the unions. Okay, so if you are even changing a tiny piece of a process that might contradict some kind of a collective bargaining agreement that has already happened, then there again you really can't do that. So it's
I'll give you the one of the, I would say, marquee examples that I've seen in my life, not mine, but my husband's company and factory, where one day he had 50 people outside his room because the size of the samosa that day was smaller than what was agreed upon in an agreement a couple of years back. I loved that example. I was so happy when he came back and he told me this, that today I just managed to get 50 people to agree that yes, it was in line with the agreement that we had. And I laughed and I told him, I'm so glad you are doing this role now. Now you understand what I've been through. So but it comes from a place, I think, ultimately, Preeti, just to add, and that's where I wanted to kind of even end this talk with. So glad you kind of also brought it in this direction. Um, the fact is, I had a posh case in a factory where I was the only girl, because there were women in contractual workforce who didn't have a proper toilet for themselves. There are till date diversity in the absolute lowest rung, who are unheard of, who are not taken care of. And over years, I've realized that the responsibility that I hold as a woman leader just gets even more and more, stringent or difficult. because you have them. It's not that you don't have them, but they're somehow invisible when it comes to moving up the layers. I have a woman somewhere in here doing the housekeeping in the factory, but I will not have that lady in the shop floor. High possibility. Now, of course, things are changing. You've started picking up roles and finding them, and a lot of companies are doing some very good work in terms of getting women on the shop floor. But that distinction, of either I can get in through because I come in from a premium college and I come in through hierarchy, and because I've come in from the management, so to say, or else I'm just there as an invisible person. Somewhere I'm not flowing through the funnels. So I have plantations, and in Tata Consumer Products we have plantations across. We have almost 50% diversity there, but then none of them want to become managers. They don't want to, and they are not. It's a mix of both. I have very limited managers, and we've started effort on that direction, wanting to say, why don't you want to lead the estate that you want to pluck in? But it's a societal barrier. There are associations with, why do I do this? I have my set of friends. I don't really want to move up, etc. When I used to manage it with Cipla for sales HR, we found so many women who wanted to do sales, and we got them in. Of course, not like a great percentage of the overall numbers, but we found them. And we realized that they wanted to sell products. They were okay with kind of sitting on a scooty or a bike, or roaming around in buses in the entire northeast, east, and going and finding doctors and pitching their products too. But I think it's so ingrained in the society that a woman really can't do this work, that you just make it more and more difficult. I mean, at Tata Consumer, we've tied up with Starbucks, with all the Tajes of the all our IHCL, saying that okay, any of our women employees, especially in the field, should just be allowed to walk in any of your places and use the loo. But I don't want it restricted to my people only. I want it to be open for almost everybody, because those are real challenges that they face when they get on the field. I have to solve for their biological needs to ensure that they are doing well on the role that they are doing. But then the problem is, because there are very limited of us there, we don't see these things every day. Okay, only when you went to that place, right, you realize that the washroom becomes such a big thing. It's a big thing. That's a reality. We are still struggling with that. Maternity, the woman coming after that, we talk about creche and childcare. But if you don't have that right place, if you're not able to spend time, and I mean, the Tatas were pretty much instrumental to lay out the Maternity Act for us, and get creches in factories, and we continue to do that. But do we have that kind of an ecosystem across the board which is supporting women to come back? That's always a debate that never settles. But I will come to the last bit of just saying that why I've put this very surprised expression is that over a period of time I've realized that me doing this role has become one of my silent strengths now. People don't expect a woman to walk in that room when a negotiation is on. They don't expect a younger person to be just breezing in one of the vehicles and coming in there and wanting to have a look at the factory. I think that surprise element is the first bit that really helps me. It disarms the team in front of you. They really don't know how to do and what to do about this conversation, and it gives me an edge. So over a period of time, what I've learned and understood is that I took a role, I made it, I kind of softened the edges, I changed it as per my style, and it's doing well for me. And that's the career advice that I pretty much give to everybody in HR and across other functions as well, who I meet, especially on day one, saying that you find a role, you make it your own. Idea is to deliver in that role. It doesn't matter how and who you are in terms of doing it. So yeah, that's broadly me, Preeti. Rekha, thank you so much, Ashmita, for your kind of support. And yeah, just wanted to kind of give a brief view of the role, and happy to take any questions as well. Preeti, you should not be talking, you should be messaging, but yeah, sorry.
I will let Rekha speak. I will message.
She's already
Spoken enough.
she's already broken that this thing. So I think she's on the way to talking now.
Yeah.
No, it was really nice to have you on the. I mean, in a way, we had a sort of we had a ringside view, with not so many people here. Hopefully, a lot of people will tune in and listen to this later. I'm sure they will. We'll put it on the website, right?
That's fine. Happy to kind of even address questions, especially in this function. I've seen that people in their starting years like to understand, what to do next, etc. And
Yeah.
actually what I would always like to do is come in at that stage, because the leaders who came in at that stage and told me what I need to do has stayed with me
Yes.
till date, and it's done well for my career. So why not do that, or rather kind of paid forward. So how do you align with different locations? Okay, Preeti,
Okay,
that's your
sorry. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't frame it very well because I was in such a hurry to type it. Um, Basically, like India has got very different laws in every state, right? And if you have worked with 10,000 people across multiple states, then how do you bring parity in the policies in terms of aligning those policies from an Indian perspective? Okay, then state-centric rules versus the global piece that you have been looking, versus the sort of the perspective of an organization that they don't want to carve out too many exceptions country-wise.
Absolutely. So, Preeti, I mean, because you manage the legal side of it, you completely understand. I do crack these jokes that a lot of lawyers just make a living out of, kind of giving me cuts and dices of this works here, this does not work here, etc., etc. I think in a lot of policies, what's worked out well for us is that you just take the higher road and you apply it everywhere. Okay, so you know that leaves are of a certain number. You try and just take the highest number of it, just give it to all the states. Just make it easier for in terms of execution. Most of the policies in most of our companies that I've worked with have aligned in that manner. In specific states, and those are typically in Kerala, West Bengal, etc., where the aligning becomes very difficult, you do keep it separate. It depends on what kind of institution you have. I mean, if it's sales, people are slightly more moving around. That's when you may have a challenge if they are working across a couple of states. But if it's a factory, it's just easier. You just have to align it to the particular factory's laws and what is required in the state. For us, again, in plantations, it's easier because it's in sync with the Plantations Act. But of course, right now we are figuring all of it out with the labor codes, which will come someday. So we are just figuring out how is it that we find ways to align it. It is difficult. We have a lot of partners who help us with that. From a ER point of view, my strategy is simple. I would like to be proactive than reactive. So I would like the teams to be seeing and reviewing more and more of what can go wrong, which you of course get from the unions as a chart of demands. You get it from the external world in terms of notices. You can get it from the external other companies, that what are they doing. So you generally have a sense of what is about to go wrong. Try and find ways on what is it that you can mitigate on that even before it hits you. I mean, my typical success metric every year to my manager is that there are no strikes. That the fact that you did not lose any mandates on account, sorry, mandates, but you did not lose any work days on account of anything going wrong. And similarly, the fact that you were able to proactively redress and solve for issues. And even if I mean, it's not possible that everything will go perfectly well, but if you did, there are enough and more learnings that we pick up from that, and we ensure that it's not done in the next cycle. So those are pieces that we typically run centrally. We have great folks on the ground running it. We try and see that we have a good mix of women there as well. But you keep on learning from the ground. You just stay very close to what's happening. Keep on connecting regularly. That is essential. So I think I'm on the road almost every second week, because you sense it when you're there. You realize it. You see it in the body language. You see if something's going wrong. You make your presence felt by people knowing that there is somebody who is there to listen to you, and that it can be all solved by conversations in house. The more you create that amount of I would say repeated, reiterated messaging, and then of course, thanks to technology, now you have helplines, you have chatbots, you have ways that people can really reach out to you irrespective of wherever they are. It just becomes easier to align, irrespective of the language, irrespective of the background, and then of course the laws.
Brilliant, thank you. I could just monopolize this conversation, but I will stop.
I think we connect more beyond this as well. But
Yeah. No, I think next time I'm in Mumbai, I'll definitely let you know. And if you're coming to Delhi, let me know. We'll just catch up over coffee or something. Okay.
I will love to do that. I'll love to connect with any Elsa. Always an honor to meet, not more than anything else.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Reho.
Thank you, Snigdha. I mean, I don't really have any idea about the HR this thing, frankly, but it was very revealing because it's just presented so clearly, I think. And your journey, the personal thing is always, I think, the easiest to understand, Um, and I think, Preeti, also this kind of stuff would really help the youngsters. We have so many of those people always asking for help on our, that we have this WhatsApp group, which is that professionals group. Are you on that?
I am not on that.
So
We really,
perhaps we should
you
point people to her. That
Sure,
would be a great help to,
I'm more than happy.
direct help.
actually, Rekha, how I connected with Snigdha. Okay, I'll
Ah,
tell you that. Basically, the whole mentorship program that we had put out
mm,
back in early March, or I think somewhere when we
yeah.
were about putting it out. So we had we had put this message out, and then she messaged me saying that I would love to know more about it, and I could
Oh,
be
okay.
both a mentor as well as a mentee. Snigdha, just on that, Vandana, you can stop recording. You can stop recording, please.